Hello friends and enemies, welcome to the video. I am launching a new series I'm calling Character Design Forge, where I write and design TTRPG characters. For those of you who don't know, TTRPG stands for Tabletop Role-Playing Game, a type of board game that involves dice and roleplay with a group of friends, or at least that's my very broad summary of the genre. Most of the characters I'm making are intended for Dungeons & Dragons, but I also hope to incorporate other systems like Daggerheart into the future, once I understand the system a little bit better. For now though, I thought, what a better way to start a new series than to go over a character I'm very familiar with who needs a new design. You read the thumbnail correctly. Somehow I've managed to play this one D&D character for a little over 7 years at this point. I honestly don't know how the campaign has lasted this long. Although, when I say a 7-year-long campaign, I don't want to put a false idea in your head. It really has been 7 years, but our sessions are nowhere near frequent, and we have at certain points spanned a year or so without playing, then come out of hibernation at other points and have a good streak of sessions, only to go back into hibernation again. Just like every D&D campaign, it is beholden to what we're able to fit into our real lives at the moment. I am just extremely grateful that a small group of people I play with are just as determined as I am to see the story through. I just wanted to clarify the reality of having a campaign that runs this long, since most people in the hobby have not had that experience. I don't want to paint it as an idealized picture of having a session once a week for 7 years, because I don't know if that's even achievable for anyone besides Critical Role, although we would all love that if we could. I'm just grateful for when we do get to play, and for being reminded all the time how much the story and characters mean to all of us. Thankfully as well, I am the type of obsessive creative that is extremely self-motivated. Even if nothing in the narrative changes, I am perfectly happy just making art and fan comics of my disaster vampire in the meantime, and now I want to introduce him to you. This is Vladimir von Lockhart, formerly a vampire cleric, now a vampire cleric / paladin, as if you didn't think it could get any worse. And yes, before people start commenting on how bad of an idea it is, I am aware. I did it on purpose. For those who aren't familiar with D&D, the standard way the religion system works is you have a pantheon of gods to choose from, if you decide your character has a religion. They all have different domains and things associated with them, similar to the Greek gods. However, there is one unifying quality most of them share, which is that every morally good holy domain hates the undead with a passion. They see the undead as an abomination of life, and all have abilities centered around smiting undead, along with either turning them or instantly killing them. So you can see how a vampire cleric who worships a good domain can be problematic. But I did it for a reason. I knew this would be a massively fun character to play, because I adore characters with a huge amount of internal conflict, and I knew this would provide endless opportunities of external conflict as well for our dungeon master. And it has. I have had the time of my life playing this character, mainly running for my life, coming up with insane plans, and honestly, growing up alongside him. I refuse to get emotional about it here, so I'm going to pivot into telling you about him as the speed paint starts. Vlad was born into a community of rural wood elves, very disconnected from the rest of the world. They struggled immensely with hunger, and famine almost completely wiped them all out. Before it could, though, Vlad was discovered by vampires and brought to a nearby vampire castle. He was turned into a vampire by the Master, who called himself Lord Astaroth. Vlad is part of an active campaign, like I mentioned, and his story hasn't completely unfolded yet. Even 7 years into this campaign, I still don't know the exact details on why he was chosen and what Astaroth wants with him, but I'm terrified to find out. But besides that, Astaroth's family crest is a wreath of thorned roses, and to show that he owns Vlad in every sense of the word, Astaroth burned this sigil on Vlad's face. After Vlad became lucid, he fled from being a member of Astaroth's ranks and was terrified of what he was becoming. When he got to the nearest town, he lost himself in bloodlust and ended up killing several people. This permanently changed him. He was utterly devastated. He started wearing a mask, both out of shame but also because he couldn't take the fear in people's eyes when they looked at him. He totally retreated into himself for years, completely isolated. Despite the fact that he could not look into a mirror, he didn't need to because he saw the abandonment and misery he felt reflected in the faces of those who were also discarded by the world, tucked up in alleyway squalor huts or begging for cash by the side of the road. One day, though, something changed. Vlad came across a child stricken by hunger. That in itself was not unusual, but something about the image stirred something within him, feelings of sympathy for both his child self who looked just like her, along with sympathy for the actual child in front of him. Even within his profound grief, he had an idea, an opportunity. Blood existed within almost every living thing. It wasn't dependent on weather conditions or plague, and was literally within the arm's reach of someone who loves you the most. Seeing these forgotten people like him lining the city streets, those hunted by hunger and loss, he might be able to save those people in the way that Astaroth saved him. So, Vlad took on a new mission. For the next several years, he wandered cities, finding those who were dying and saving them in the only way he knew how. He joined a holy domain, thinking he was spiritually embodying the values of protection and empathy which were represented by the church. By the end of this period in his life, he converted a handful of people into vampires, including a 10-year-old child. I know, it's bad. Vlad didn't know, though. I will be totally transparent in admitting I didn't have a solid plan at this point on how Vlad was going to accomplish curing world hunger through vampirism, but that was his vision. I literally made up this character on the spot because my first ever D&D character died really suddenly and unexpectedly, so I didn't have a concrete plan for a good chunk of time. I did know, however, that saving the world through vampirism would not be through the use of a human farm, like my friends repeatedly suggested throughout the last 7 years just to annoy me. Something else they got a kick out of was one day I was having a conversation with my mom, and she was reading the Anne Rice vampire series, and she said, in one of these books, a vampire converts a child into a vampire. That's so horrific. And I was just sitting there beside her going, yeah, I can't imagine why someone would do that. I told my friends about it later, and they rightfully laughed at me for it. In terms of what Vlad was actually thinking for accomplishing his grand plan, though, as the story developed more, I like to think that his plan centered on community. Community was the one thing he had when everything else failed. Even Astaroth and his vampires were, in a way, still a community, even if it was one he didn't agree with. So, I had the idea that he wanted to find a way to make it possible for vampires to drink blood from each other in a sustainable way, basically creating a food source for emergencies as long as people had each other. This wouldn't be the main source of blood, though. The main source of blood would need to be generated to refill the amount the vampires digest if they were to drink from each other, and so Vlad was hoping to prioritize creating some sort of infinite blood fountain where nobody was harmed to get blood, and it sat in the town square. Nobody had to fight each other for it, nobody has to kill for it, and in the worst-case emergencies, they could rely on each other for a good period of time, as long as they have each other, since vampires in this world don't need to eat as often as normal people need to for food, and they can access it anytime and for free. I have a line in my script that just says insert joke about vampire communism here. Oh, it's also important to note I pictured this taking place in the Underdark or in the Shadowlands or something, somewhere where it was just vampires and normal people aren't in danger. And of course, with a goal as ambitious as this, he'd need to implement other questionable actions along the way, mainly wanting to, as their vampire master, put up a mental limitation within the vampires he created, which would prevent them from killing other beings for blood. I, as the player, know the whole thing would have spiraled out of control. As soon as you start making limitations like that, the trend doesn't usually stop. Thankfully, though, I was saved the time by having it blow up in my face before I even got to do the plan, which is how you know you are playing D&D correctly. Before Vlad could accomplish anything on that front, he was stopped and was told by an agent of his benevolent god the true nature and consequences that come with vampirism, which his vampire master did not tell him. It's important to mention that this is how vampires work specifically in this campaign. Every campaign is going to have different rules and interpretations for this kind of thing, so it's important to know that they don't all work the same. One of the narrative choices I really respected from our DM was the fact that they did not tell me about the true nature of vampirism ahead of time. I was just in the dark about it as much as Vlad was, which really helped put me in the character's shoes, which was a great gift, especially early on in a campaign. Both Vlad and I learned from this divine agent that, in this world, when a person becomes a vampire, their soul becomes corrupted. When they die, their soul is unable to enter any good sort of afterlife, and the pieces of it actually break apart and are scattered across space in a million little pieces, and the vampire spends their afterlife in eternal pain. Yeah, it's a dark campaign. I thought I was showing up playing Hotel Transylvania Thanos, but it turns out I am playing the Antichrist, and I learned that in real time during a session. You can imagine what that did to Vlad's mental state. He became severely depressed, exclusively on the behalf of those who he had turned, with almost no regard for himself. He proceeded to make a series of selfish, self-preserving choices in the hopes he could survive and somehow fix things, which made his god banish him on top of it all. This was Vlad's lowest point. Thankfully, though, for the first time in his life, he actually had someone to help pull him out of it. One of the other player characters, Belfic, a dwarven bard and later his love interest, was there for him. He gave Vlad something he thought he'd never feel again, a small sliver of real, genuine hope that he could fix this, which was new and not the debilitating existential obligation of hope to fix things he had before. From then on, he changed. He became hell-bent on fixing all of the damage he's done, determined to find a cure for vampirism and eradicate the soul curse from existence, and he is willing to sacrifice everything to get there, all the while dealing with the crushing guilt his past actions have caused him. That is where the crux of his story lies: hedonistic determination, the religious complex that comes from yearning to be holy and gain the approval of the church, yet literally getting set on fire by stepping foot in one because of his nature, and also creative ways of self-preservation would be how I describe his story. I am going to skip over years of story that have come since for the sake of time, because I do want to talk about the designing process itself. The last bit of context you need is the fact that, after literal years spent in the inner religious turmoil he resides in, being hunted by several enemies, and after being dropped by yet another god, Vlad got a surprising offer. A woman in dark clothing and wearing a veil appeared and stopped time to talk to him. She explained that she was the goddess of trickery, a morally good god, and that she was impressed by both his hedonistic selflessness and also those creative ways of self-preservation that I mentioned earlier. To give an example of one of those instances, just so you get an idea, Vlad was in a situation before this, when a vampire hunter, who was the father of the little girl he converted, was coming to kill him. Vlad got cornered, and this was the hardest battle he'd ever fought. This guy was straight up going to kill him if he didn't do something. So, having a bag of holding, he turned into a bat, went inside the bag of holding, turned back into himself once inside it, then cast the cleric spell Banishment on himself. The way Banishment works, for those who don't know, it is an offensive cleric spell meant to use only against enemies. There are many planes of existence in D&D campaigns, similar to different worlds. We have the material plane, which is essentially Earth, where the vast majority of campaigns take place. We have the elemental planes, the fire plane, water plane, etc. And what Banishment does is, if you are fighting a creature and it is from a different plane of existence than the plane you are currently on, you can cast Banishment on it, and if the spell succeeds, the creature is instantly transported back to its original plane of existence, and the fight is over. The Bag of Holding is a classic D&D item. It is a bag whose bottom is actually a portal to a small pocket dimension. There's no air in the pocket dimension, it's small, and creatures are not meant to go in it. This item is meant to be extra storage, that's the intended design. I imagine you can see where I'm going with this. Because Vlad was in the pocket dimension, he was not on his original plane of existence, and because I was the one casting the banishment spell on myself, I could willingly fail the saving throw and let it succeed automatically. Something important to note is that the banished creature does not get to pick where they are or how high they are up when they are transported back to their original plane, and so that's how I ended up falling out of the sky 6 stories down into an ocean while simultaneously earning the affection of the goddess of trickery. I love D&D so much. The goddess, whose name is Venelia, believes in Vlad's ability to do good, which is a first for him besides Belfic's faith in him. The two characters are helping Vlad rebuild and inspire him to continue to try and be a better person, not just for the sake of accomplishing his goal and saving everyone, but also because he deserves it for his own sake. He knows his crimes are utterly unforgivable, but Vlad is not trying to be redeemed. Rather, he's just trying to do good for the sake of good and save as many people as he can to try to put something positive in the universe, not caring a whole lot about what happens to himself in doing so. These are the themes I tried to channel into his current redesign: the hope for becoming better, the creativity of his tricks, and his scrappiness of repeatedly almost dying but sticking it out like the cockroach that he is. He has a million different items on him which he uses for his plans, and I wanted his design to reflect that and be cluttered, yet still visually cohesive and have a sense of weight, something I feel like I failed in past design attempts. I really like how this one turned out, though. Similarly, to further capture the scrappiness, I wanted him to have mended and sewn some parts of his clothing himself. There was a recent story beat where he was blasted out of the sky and fell several stories. Again, I know, it's a problem at this point, but he was blasted out of the sky, and I had the idea that afterwards he fixed his clothing where he could, or outright replaced areas he couldn't with canvas from the old, spare ship's sails, which was in the storage unit of the boat he's currently on. I thought that illustrated his scrappiness well, along with giving him some visible injuries, which I feel like we don't see enough of in D&D character designs. Also, as a side note on the topic of Vlad's scrappiness, I'm excited because I talked to my DM semi-recently, and he said that if I play my cards right and save up money for it in-game, it is possible Vlad could get a coffin and have some sort of vampire regeneration should he be killed within a certain radius of the coffin. I'm super excited about it. Secretly, as a bonus to that idea, I want to see if I can try and convince the DM to let me add additional flavor, which is a term that just means added narrative detail that has no statistical or in-game benefit. Simply it is description for the benefit of the story or realizing your character. I had the idea for flavor that regeneration for Vlad will be slightly faster than other vampires. Again, not faster enough to make any in-game difference, but simply slightly faster from a narrative perspective, due to the fact that neither heaven nor hell wants his soul because he's so morally gray, and so Vlad has less struggle in pulling away from the afterlife. Oh, one other bit of flavor that I really like, and this one is actually canon. I had the idea that during his time in physical churches, part of the pain he suffered in being there was depicted by a burn mark he had scattered across his body. It is the burn of sunlight through a stained glass window, leaving a permanent impression of the stained glass hurting him, being a sign from the god he worshipped at the time. In the original drawing of the body I did, this burn is more pronounced and has an image of an undead being smited on it, but upon thinking about it further, I felt it was a little much, even for me. So, I redid the body again, and I'm much happier with it. The light of the stained glass burned him still, it's just toned down. The player of Belfic had a great idea that added to this too. He pitched that some of the burn is on Vlad's arm and hand, while the rest is on his body, because in the knee-jerk reaction of bright light, Vlad instinctively covered his face, and so the burn hit him at an angle. I love that and added it to the design immediately. Aside from the scars and the scrappiness, the last detail I want to touch on is his sense of hope and determination and how it's portrayed in his design. His plaid scarf is his prized possession. It is the only thing from his home which he has left, and it was a gift from his mother. He has worn it for over 100 years and has taken great care of it. Because it represents his home, his humanity before he was a vampire and lost his soul, I had the idea that when Venelia gave him his new powers, she gave him an additional scarf pattern to use, which he has incorporated into a sash below his belt, since she and Belfic are guiding him to be a better person. His hope is also shown through the jars he has on his person. An additional bit of flavor I have for Vlad is that, now that he is a very strong vampire, when he is in nature or standing on grass, a small amount of plant life around him starts to wither and die in a very tight radius to his body. Despite this, in the same way he would go into churches despite it hurting, he still wants to heal people the proper way, even if it's extremely hard to do so, since he is working with radiant magic when using healing spells, and that's painful to undead. And, as a cleric, he also can't use any healing herbs because they wither and die. Despite this, he keeps one small strand of herbs, which are insulated by a jar, so not touched by his presence. Even if he can't use them himself, he hopes that, if he ever gets in a position where he needs to, he can give someone else the jar, then back up 10 feet away from where they opened it, and backseat gamer style yell from a distance what to do. I love details like these so much, that's why I keep adding them. The last little detail about his hope and his outfit overall is the flower he also keeps in a jar. When Belfic started out in this campaign, he wore a flower crown that consisted of bright blue flowers interwoven together. As the campaign went on, and times grew even harder for him than they were before, he took on a less whimsical approach and ditched the flower crown. Before he did, though, he gave a flower to Vlad. It was important to Belfic that Vlad have a piece of his whimsy and his heart, and carry it with him when times get dark for him as well. Because of that, Vlad always keeps it on him, but luckily he does not need to reference it a lot to maintain hope, as that vibrant side of Belfic tends to come out naturally only when Vlad is around. Belfic is usually laughing at him in those moments, but doing so lovingly, like the rest of the ribbing at the table. And besides, the way I play the character and who I am in real life, we both totally deserve it. I hope you liked seeing this redesign and hearing about my boy. This is my first YouTube video, and there'll be a lot more to come. Most of the upcoming videos will center around creating new characters and going through the design process, along with trying out some other mediums of art and digital sculpting. But I am always happy to talk about the characters I currently play / have played in the past as well. Liking and subscribing really helps me out, but even if you don't, thanks for watching. I hope you have a great day.